I mean, I'm afraid to ask you because you like dropped all these little things in there, like that you studied physics and that you were in the army. But the thing that I really want to get to is I heard you giving a talk that I think a lot of people would be really surprised by, and it was about the how boys are being raised in the United States and kind of the red pilling and how that's important. And so I'm totally down with people looking up your bio, but I think you've got a lot to say about red pill that is going to shock a lot of people.
Yeah, so here's the thing about the red pill and a lot of the ideas around it.
What is the red pill for people that don't know? You use a lot of jargon in your talk that I think people on the inside know what they're talking about, but other people wouldn't.
Okay, so I'm going to use the jargon as it's intended and then describe it that way. And we may not get to why I need to make that distinction, but we'll see. So red pill is understanding the true nature of intersexual dynamics. Okay? And the problem today is that a lot of intersexual dynamics is just being outright misfed to us, or being lied to for many reasons in many ways. And you kind of see this when you look at some raw numbers. We're below replacement and people aren't dating anymore. Below replacement is our fertility rate. I think it's like 1.7. You need to be at like 2.2 or higher to ensure that like your civilization continues. And for people who, to dive into that, for every 2 people have 1 kid, that's not good enough because they're both going to die. So if everyone keeps that up, so you need to have more than 2 kids on average. And we are not doing that. Not only are we not doing that, we're having them later, much later. And this is what the talk focused on. Society is, it's a pendulum swing. Some would argue not really, and I'm starting to shift into the not really camp. We aren't honoring the differences in the men and women. We're treating boys like defective girls, and we're treating girls like they should be exactly the same as guys. And it is creating this weird world where no one really, certainly under 25, and just because of the nature of my life, I've had the ability to talk and interact with a lot of them. Dating is very different than it was even when I was 25, and I'm 36. So 11 years ago, things really changed, and the things that changed, Tinder. I was a dog, man. Like I'm telling you, before I met my girl, I was a dog. I was on every app, right? And Tinder happened so fast, I never had a Tinder. Not because I'm better than Tinder, it just wasn't around yet. We've been together for 8 years. So it's a quick change. And it changed the dating landscape. You're not talking to people directly anymore, right? You're not walking up and approaching. The whole rite of passage for a guy to go get shot down by a girl or have to talk to her father when he calls the house, days is over, man. And on top of that, women are now being encouraged to embrace and flaunt their sexuality without considering, like, perhaps, what is that old saying? Don't rip down a fence if you're not exactly sure why I was there in the first place. Well, we don't really people are starting to learn that, maybe that's not what they do with it, whether they decide that this whole culture of the Me Too movement and trust me, I'm not one of those guys that say they didn't do it. I say this. You look at Hollywood and there's a bunch of names. If it was really a witch hunt, right? Like, would you go after all these guys? Everybody would be up there. Nah, there's like a few dudes and then a bunch of stories come up. So you probably should at least, where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm that kind of guy. With that said, one of the things I said when Harvey, and I know I'm jumping off on a tangent, but I'll jump back in. One of the things I said about the whole Harvey Weinstein thing was, well, why don't we talk to the actresses that got the part, right? Why don't we see? Because look, and no one wants to have that conversation, but that conversation is part of what I'm talking about, is that we have tried to blur our differences to androgyny, but human nature is like, I know 50 years been good, but I've been around for millions evolving, and I'm going to do what I do. And whenever I got a chance to, we used to have kind of a system in place to deal with that. And now you're crazy for suggesting it. So what I talk to, I can't talk to what it's like to be a woman. At the very least, I have my ideas what I think women should be, but who's going to, listen to me, whatever, right? I'm a guy. What I am though is a guy, so I can talk to guys and I can speak to their issues and do my part there, as far as helping us out, because I think guys are getting the short end of the stick, not just directly in terms of some of the legislation and the way medicine is handled. If you watch a speech, I talked about how guys are like 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD and custodial. When parents are awarded custody in a split, women get it like 80-something% of the time. And the suicide rate for men is insane, not just in general, but especially after a breakup. I mean, and no one talks about these things because why should they? You know, we're guys, we're toughen up. One of the burdens of masculinity is you don't complain, right? To the point that even if you complain about legitimate stuff, other guys are like, man, shut up. Like, we're not trying to hear that weak stuff. But someone's got to talk about it. And I'm in a position where no one can call me, weak. My resume is there. I've clearly risen to the challenge many times in my life as a man. So I can talk about these things that are important to me. Because ultimately what happens if we don't cater to young men is they grow up to be adults. And all of a sudden, your daughters don't have a suitable mate. Or you have a guy that's obsessed with porn and OnlyFans and then promotes that culture that makes your daughter go, there's money there, okay? Or you have guys that aren't capable of defending themselves against guys that didn't get that home training, because there's always wolves out there, So someone needs to talk to guys. And that's just the direct hit. We're not talking about, the porn and the video games. Huge industry, and it's not even so much the video games. The video games are, I don't play them, but I can understand how one gets, into them. Okay. But the porn is a big deal, because porn is a single missile that breaks off into many. It's a scatter bomb. It comes at you and you think, oh, it's just something I'm gonna sneak away and do, but your brain treats it like any other addiction. It's one of those things. Porn is unique in its addiction qualities or its use in that, unlike other drugs, porn is not a social drug. You can slink away, do it. No one knows you do it for years. You ain't never seen most crackheads smoke together. People use together, right? No guys are getting together and let's go watch some porn together. No, it's the thing that's done in shame. It's in the dark. It ruins relationships because of that. So once again, we're coming back to what happens when no one talks to guys and tries to help them deal with the issues. This society is deemed unimportant. Well, society starts to collapse. And it's hard, man. And it's very hard because there's not a lot of credit even given anymore to being a good man. All masculinity is lumped in to toxic, too.
Yeah, I think that there's like huge social forces that are going on that have changed the fabric of society. And like you had said, we're not able to talk about these things. And, one of the thoughts that I have about human nature is we don't really need soldiers in the same way that we used to. Like once we had the atomic bomb, then the way that society started to deal with the fact that, like it used to be, so we talk about on this podcast the theory called bare branches theory, which is what happens to a society when you have so many single men that because they have no chance of getting married. They either haven't been able to collect enough resources, they haven't been, there's one man that's getting several women, and so there's like not a good balance. Then you start having an unstable society, and that unstable society, like in ancient times, you'd have banditry, you'd have people being robbers, you'd have militaries forming, and so countries used to go start frivolous wars to go have those soldiers die, and then the ones that came back, they had a selection pressure. Those are going to be the strongest ones, the leaders. They're going to be integrated back into society. But now you don't have that with the atomic bomb, like. Now we've got a thing. We've never been able to get rid of this. Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.